When I began collecting games for the Sega Genesis seriously back in the late 90s, prices were nowhere near what they are today. In fact, the average price of a game was in the single digits, a fraction of what it is now. That got me to examine the market on a whole in 2022 and see what games cost the most across North America, Europe, and Japan. And boy did I get a shock. I knew things were more expensive now, but I had no clue just how much higher some of these prices had gotten. Titles that used to cost next to nothing have exploded, and the more expensive stuff continues to rise. I've put together a list of some of the most expensive software in every region to give you an idea of what you'll pay for those rare games missing from your gaming shelf. I used a combination of price charting and eBay to average out the cost, and I mainly focused on complete in-box listings. I'm also not including software that really weren't standalone games. Outback Joey, for instance, was an exercise program meant to be used with a body monitor, and Miracle Piano taught you how to play the instrument. These items were limited releases that are themselves worth quite a bit. We have 30 games to go over, so let's get started. Our first region is North America. Launched in the summer of 1989, this would be the platform's most successful market in terms of hardware and software sales. Sega really focused on making games specifically for the taste of American gamers, doubling down on popular sports releases and licensed products. If you are shooting for a full set of US games, let's take a look at what's going to cost you the most. Originally released in 1992 by Namco, this popular sequel to the arcade hit goes for quite a bit. You're gonna pay upwards of $300 for a complete copy of this in good shape. I always found the price of this one to be somewhat curious. It's sold well enough to warrant a sequel, so it really shouldn't be that hard to find, yet it's worth quite a bit. Splatterhouse 2 was also a very solid game for what it's worth, and a great addition to the Genesis library. Troubleshooter was released in early 1992 in the US by Vic Tokai. It's a shoot 'em up that was known as Battlemania in Japan. It did not sell well in the United States and thus tends to be on the rare side. If you are looking to add this unique title to your collection, you are looking at close to $350 to get it complete and in fine shape. It's got great graphics and music, so if you've never played it, I highly recommend that you do. While the original Aero the Acrobat sold well, its sequel, released in 1995 by Sunsoft, did not do nearly as well. This resulted in a limited run in a fairly rare game that can cost nearly $400 complete and in good condition. The first can be found for peanuts, but good luck not paying an arm and a leg for this one. There were a number of unlicensed games released for the Sega Genesis in North America, but 1994's Spiritual Warfare is gonna cost you the most. Released by Wisdom Tree, it features themes that revolve around the Christian religion. Finding this sucker complete with all the original inserts and styrofoam is tough, and will cost you above $400 regularly. It's shipped in a crappy cardboard box, so the ones you see tend to be beat up quite a bit. It was only released in the US. In 1991, Renovation released El Viento for the Sega Genesis. It was fairly well received and sold well enough to get a sequel called Ernest Evans the following year. You wouldn't know it by its modern price, however. If you want this in your collection, expect it to run a good $400 for everything in excellent condition. This one was quite decent and the best in the trilogy that ended with a net Futatabi on the Sega CD. In 1994, Acclaim released Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage in the United States. It sold well, and if you want a copy today, it can actually be gotten for a manageable price, even complete in box. But there was also an extremely rare collector's edition available, and over the years, it has become quite the expensive piece of shelf candy. This one goes well north of $400 to get everything in good shape. It shows up rarely for sale, however, so good luck finding it. It tends to be an outlier. At the time, collector's editions were not a common occurrence, and you'll find little like it in the Genesis library. In 1994's Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel was a spin-off of Sunsoft's Aero the Acrobat series. It's amazing to see how this one has gone up over the years. When I was collecting heavily, this could be gotten all day long for $20 complete, no issues at all. My oh my, how things have changed. If you want Zero complete and in good shape today, expect to pay as much as $500 for it. It's one of the most expensive games now, and one of the biggest turnarounds in value I have ever seen. In 1995, Capcom released a rather timid adaptation of the Punisher arcade game for the Genesis. They obviously had little faith in it because not many copies were produced, and over the years, the prices have reflected its scarcity. This is another one that can soar past $500 to get it on your shelf. This was always kind of expensive even when I was collecting. I remember seeing it for $80 to $100 as far back as 2008. I kinda wish I had bought it back then. Musha is a legend among the Genesis faithful. It was released by Seismic in 1990 and over the years gained a cult following as one of the better shoot-'em-ups for the platform. And boy does today's market reflect that popularity. Musha Complete is a $1,000 game now. This is another one that was always high. 15 years ago you'd need to invest $100 to get it, so it's no surprise it's reached this level. If you need this one to complete that full set, I advise looking at alternative means outside of eBay. Atlus released the extremely Zelda-like Crusader of Senti in 1995. It was a very solid game that grew in reputation over the years, despite not selling well at the time. That created a rarity that has ultimately made this one of the most expensive North American releases you can find. Complete and mint, this is often well over $1,000. Even cartridge only, it's north of $500. This has led to a slew of bootlegs and reproductions, so if you just want a physical copy, there are alternatives. But if you need an authentic version to complete that North American set, there are few places to turn to. Even among collector and trading groups, it's highly sought after. This one is gonna hurt your wallet no matter where you get it. The Japanese Mega Drive market was wildly different from North America. It started in 1988 and Sega struggled for the entire run of the platform, selling far less units. Like most gaming systems of the time, the Japanese Mega Drive also got a bunch of releases that were never localized in English territories. That makes the following list quite a bit different from what we just went over. Japanese Mega Drive titles have also increased heavily in price just in the last 4 years, doubling in average value. That makes for a number of really expensive games and a bummer for new collectors. In 1995, the Mega Drive had long been dead in Japan. The Saturn was out and Sega was well on its way in the 32-bit generation. Ristar's release wasn't just surprising there, it was also among the final 24 or so titles released for the platform. As you can imagine, not many copies were made, and if you want it today, expect to pay $600 for it. It's much cheaper in other regions, but not nearly as rare. Most of you know Castlevania Bloodlines quite well. Also known as Castlevania the New Generation in PAL regions, it's one of the platform's most popular games. It just so happens that it had a 1994 Japanese Mega Drive version as well, called Vampire Killer. Again, because sales in Japan tended to be much lower, this one had just one run and is pretty hard to come by. In excellent condition, you should expect to pay $600 to $800 here. I'm really glad I bought this one when I did. Sunsoft released the Japanese-only Panorama Cotton in 1994 as well. This was a forward-scrolling shoot-'em-up with a killer soundtrack. Its initial release included a promotional extra, a full-size teacup. To get the game itself, you are looking at a good $600 to $700, but if you want that original teacup in the box, it's gonna be well over $1,000. This makes Panorama Cotton one of the Mega Drive's most expensive Japanese exclusives. In late 1995, and among the final releases for the Mega Drive, came a new entry into Sega's long-running Pingo series, Papinga Pingo. As you can imagine, not even the fact Sega did this themselves kept it from being a rare release even back then. It's actually a really good game that was only released in Japan, adding to its mystique. Add in time and the voracious appetites of collectors, and you'll now pay a good $700 for this one, on average complete and in good condition. Many of you may have never played this gem, so be sure to fire it up on your EverDrive to see what all the fuss is about. In 1992, World Amusement Studio published Twinkle Tail for the Mega Drive only in Japan. Since it was exclusive there and is a run-and-gun shooter, this thing can go for as much as $700. It was English translated years ago, perhaps lending some steam to its appeal and collectability. The gameplay puts you in mind of a vertically scrolling Contra, and it's definitely worth playing. Some games cost so much just because they are super rare. That definitely describes Virtual Bart, one of the last Japanese Mega Drive titles to hit the market in 1995. If you want this one, prepare to drop $700 or more for it. It's not a very good game, and you can get the US version for way less, but you know how it goes with regional rarity. Those of you searching for that complete set of Japanese games have a really tough road ahead paying for garbage like this. Battlemania makes the Japanese list here as well. The price of the Japanese version tends to be all over the place. Sometimes $400, sometimes twice that. It really seems to matter how many appear on the market at any given time and what's available. The Japanese release here actually came out after the North American version in 1992. In 1993, Soft Vision released the killer shoot-'em-up classic Eliminate Down in Japan. Samsung picked it up for the Korean release, but it was never localized for Western markets. That has led to an explosion of interest and pricing. A complete and good condition listing will go north of $1,000 regularly. It's quite the good game, so if you appreciate the genre, I really do recommend it. In 1993, the Mega Drive got a port of the Toa Plan arcade title Snow Brothers. This features two snowmen doing single-screen battles by turning enemies into snowballs and taking them out. I didn't play this one until years after the fact, and it's pretty good. It has additional content beyond the arcade, great animation, and huge bosses. Its huge popularity in recent years has really affected its price. Expect to pay $1,000 or more for this today. The price of fame certainly has its downside. In 1993, the sequel to Battlemania hit Japan and Korea, another shoot 'em up with excellent graphics and sound. Unlike the first one, this never had a Western release, which makes it highly sought after today. As far as game software, this one tends to stay among the most expensive games for the Mega Drive, and even card-only sales often come close to $500. It's certainly worth playing, but if you intend to buy it, your wallet is going to take one heck of a beating in the process. The European Mega Drive market wasn't as robust as the Genesis in North America, but it was still quite a bit stronger than Sega's fortunes in Japan. It released in most PAL countries in 1990, and as you'd expect, it had its own exclusives, rare games, and oddities. And surprisingly, many of them differ from North America and Japan quite a bit. In 1994, Sony Electronic Publishing released Mega Turrican in PAL territories. It was a run-and-gun action game with some seriously great graphics and sound. This one had some publishing issues in various parts of the world that caused delays in its release, something that likely affected how many units were actually made. This would explain its rather high price of $300 to $400 today. There was also never a Japanese release for it. Separation Anxiety is a 1995 Acclaim release that was also the sequel to Maximum Carnage. For some reason, it's extremely hard to find the PAL version of it. The late release probably contributed to fewer numbers being made, so rarity has spurred on collectors to pay a ton more for it. This one goes well north of $300, and it's rarely on places like eBay. Unlike North America, Europe actually got an official physical release of Alien Soldier. This was Treasure's last game for the platform, and was hastily wrapped up in an unfinished state to get it on the market. No doubt that meant that not a lot of units were made, and the reason why it sells between $300 and $500 when it does show up. The problem is that it doesn't show up very often for any less. Beware of bootlegs of this one. I've seen some with Sega PCBs that would fool most people. Like the North American release, 1995's The Punisher is highly sought after for its PAL edition as well. Usually coming in above $500, this Capcom release port of the arcade has really shot up over the years. No doubt another case of a late game released in limited numbers, it keeps going up no matter which country it sells in. The rarity and popularity of the license will likely mean it keeps going up too. If you need it to complete that set, I don't think I'd wait to see if it drops in the future. The 1994 oddity Days Before Christmas was an Australian PAL exclusive that commands as much as $600 today. It's not a good game either, and the price has been driven up only because of its relative obscurity. Sunsoft published it in a limited run because they knew the game was terrible. Add in the fact it was the only Australian exclusive ever done, and you have a recipe of a really expensive collectible. Echo Jr. was another 1995 PAL release that has shot up to above $600 today. This was meant to be an easier, kid-friendly version of the IP. It had a mix of action and educational sequences to complete and was much lighter in tone. The North American version is worth nowhere near as much. The Pirates of Dark Water was an extremely rare release for the PAL Mega Drive. Its price has been driven up to as much as $700 or more in the last few years. Sunsoft didn't make nearly as many units to sell in Europe, likely because of the waning popularity of the TV show it was based on. Mega Man: The Wily Wars made its official PAL debut in 1994. It was a collection of the first 3 NES titles remastered for the Mega Drive, and then some exclusive content added to tie all 3 together. No physical North American version was ever created from its original run, so this was the only English version available for years. Retrobit reissued it recently, but the originals still maintain their high asking prices. Here we are with yet another late release coming in 1995. The Death and Return of Superman was published in Europe by Acclaim, and man has it gotten way up there. This one routinely hits the $1,000 mark or more these days to get it complete and in great condition. The US version can be worth quite a bit itself, but nowhere near this. I was never fond of it and thought it was rather weak as far as beat-em-ups go, but if you need it to complete your regional set, it's gonna cost ya. Among the most expensive PAL games you'll see, Fatal Fury 2 stands as one of the most rare. This was because the publisher released it in few PAL territories. There are a few known Aussie versions out there, and a UK edition that many people are unsure whether it was actually ever officially released or not. This confusion and rarity has driven the price up to over $1,000, and sometimes much more. It seems to be gaining rapidly, so expect this one to be even more in the future. There is often a conversation in our hobby about the retro gaming bubble exploding and all these game prices plummeting, leaving collectors with a whole lot of expensive coasters. I don't believe that at all. With most collectors in their 30s and 40s today, they have plenty of life left in them to keep this hobby going strong for many years to come. There's even a whole generation of 20-somethings that caught the ass end of the 16-bit availability through hand-me-downs and used game stores, so I just don't see how anyone expects these prices to change significantly anytime soon. As long as the world's economy functions, items like these will stay in high demand for as long as the people who enjoyed them are still alive. That's bad news for those of you that want complete sets because it means big money. As someone who collected seriously from the late 90s onward, it's mind-boggling where these prices have gone. The days of buying lots of games has long since passed for me, and honestly, if I had to pay the prices some of this stuff is today, I don't think I'd own half of what I actually have. With that said, don't let these crazy high prices deter you from seeking out a decent library of Sega Genesis or Mega Drive games. For every crazy high title like Musha or Crusader of Senti, there are affordable gems like eSWAT well worth their asking price. In fact, stay tuned for the very next episode because we will be looking at the regions in the opposite direction and talking about the most affordable 16-bit titles in North America, Europe, and Japanese regions. That one will be a lot more opinionated, of course, but should give you a rough idea of what you can own sensibly in today's crazy retro market. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.